I'm Vita Watson Percy, and I was born in 1927.
Can you remember how old you were when y'all moved into the farmhouse?
Yes, I was 12 years old. I had just finished seventh grade. We had gone to a little rural school called Junction. At the, I'd went through seventh grade there. We moved the year that I finished seventh grade, and we moved in the springtime of that year, and but we were able to still catch the bus and go to Junction until the end of school. And the next year I was going into high school, and so we I the we were supposed to go to Moselle to school, but Dad went to before the school board and got special dispensation for us to go into town to Coleman High School. And so I went up to catch the bus. No, I didn't. I'm sorry. I rode in when he delivered the milk. I rode in the milk truck to Coleman High School.
Now, did you ever have to do any milk deliveries yourself before school?
No, well, I think a few times we may have stopped at the Banner. That was and offloaded. He was carrying milk to the Banner, and I think they were stationed in, I don't know, San Angelo probably. And he was delivering it in cans then. Before, when I was quite young, he did deliver in bottles, and he delivered to people's houses and to some of the stores in town. But I never had any part of that.
Now, back then, is this milk straight out of the cow? Was there any process done to it before it was bottled and delivered?
I think not. I believe the Banner probably pasteurized it. And of course, when he was bottling himself, I think that was before pasteurization. So yes, it was all natural milk, and the cream rose to the top. So well, I did go to Coleman High School, and I don't remember what the enrollment might have been. Maybe 300 to 400, yeah, somewhere between 300 and 400 in all four grades. And I do remember that there were about 60 in my graduating class. This was a time when Coleman grew, and we probably had more students because it was during World War II. And there was a flying school north of Coleman, and people came to Coleman to work at the airport. It was a training for the Air Force, and it was primary training. They had to go through something before primary, and then they advanced on to a secondary school, and so it was a training field for pilots. Well, anyhow, that's why Coleman grew a good bit during those 4 years. Well, in Coleman, Commerce was the main street even then. Well, it looked a little different than it does now, though. It was always a very wide street, and people parked on either side, and also they parked in the middle of the street, where there's now a separation with lamps and that sort of thing. So, and Saturday night was the big night. All the farmers came in and brought their families, and they parked. And if you didn't get to town before 6 o'clock, you probably couldn't find a parking place. And it was much livelier than it is now. That was a special night that the farmers all came to town, and they bought their groceries. That was supposedly the main thing, but it became the main thing was to visit. You'd go to each other's car, and the people that you knew well enough to sit with and chat a little while, or you just sit in your car if you got a curbside parking place and watch the people go by. It was very busy. You just can't imagine how busy it was. For a short time, they had curbside service, and would bring your order to the car.
Bring it right out to the car.
Uh-huh.
How fun! Now, which kids in the family did you grow up with? Did you do a lot of that with some of the aunts and uncles?
Well, I guess Patty and I always did more things together than with anybody else. She was just 2 years younger than I, and she started to school a year. Well, when she was only 5, she started school, and they weren't so strict about those things, and she wasn't 5 until January, but they did let her start, and so she was always just a year behind me, and we did a lot of things together. We did begin to have dates with guys at the airfield, the latter part of my junior year, I guess. So I guess I really should back up and say I did date in high school some too, the local boys, and as I said, Patty and I did nearly everything together, and so we did not have a telephone, and it's pretty bad to be a teenager and not have a telephone, and we just knew that we'd have a lot more dates if we only had a telephone. And we used to sit out on the front porch on those banisters out there, and watch to see if a car came over the hill, watching for headlights to see if a car would come over the hill. So, and that was that's when we first started dating.
And when you started getting to go meet and visit with airmen, what did your folks think of that?
Well, they were really very thoughtful. They'd stay up there parked on the curb till 10 or 11. Well, 10 of course not very late, but say it maybe 11 o'clock. We usually go to a movie with the airmen that we met, and then afterwards to the drugstore. There wasn't very many places we could go because the airmen did not have any cars, and of course we didn't have any access to any cars. So they were very patient to sit up there and wait for us to finish having our date with an airman.
About the farmhouse, can you tell me date or year-wise roughly when it was built?
Well, I think it was built in 1940, and that was the year I was finishing 7th grade over at Junction, and we did catch a bus and finish going to Junction. So I know it was 1940 because the following year I did start to high school, and I was in high school from 1940 to 1944. Oh, well, before that, we lived up on the hill, and this was an old, unpainted, of course it was gray-looking because board house. I don't know how long it had been since it had been painted. And as I said, it was a house up on top of a hill, and Daddy, halfway down the hill, Daddy had built a building where he processed the milk, washed the bottles and processed the milk. And further down the hill was another building, and that was where they milked the cows. And I think one reason the building was halfway down the hill, where they processed the milk and everything, was he had a gravity flow there, and quite often we didn't have running water. Most of the time, he brought water in from town in a galvanized tank on a what would you call it? A wagon, a galvanized tank on a wagon, and he had gravity for that water to flow down there, and he washed the bottles with a motor-driven brushes. Yeah, they were motor driven, and they were brushes. There were 3 of them, I think, 3 brushes. Patty and I used to do some of the washing of the bottles, and I would be the washer, and you just picked up the bottles and stuck them on those revolving brushes, and 2 of the brushes cleaned the inside, and the one in the middle got the outside. And so I usually washed and then put them over for Patty to rinse them, and stack them in crates that held the bottles. And that putt-putt motor made a lot of noise. But Mama said that she could hear us up on the hill. She could hear that putt-putt motor and Patty and me singing at the top of our voices. Some were religious songs, and some were just the popular songs of the day. Mama kept the radio on most of the time. Mama loved Western music, and we learned a lot of Western songs, I guess. And then, but I liked, as I got older and all, I liked the swing music, that was popular in the 40s. And so, Mom and she always kept the radio close to the ironing board, and we did lots of ironing. Everything got ironed. And so Mama and Patty and I, all 3, did a lot of ironing. Mm-hmm. And anyhow, the radio was close to the ironing board, and Mama would have it on Western, and here I'd come by and see if I could find a station that that had the music of the 40s on. And in a little while, Mama would come, it's her turn to iron, and she'd turn it back to a Western station. So I'm glad to have that question posed, because my dad managed during the Depression to buy a good bit of land. And as far as I know, his family had never owned land before. And I think it's because he had a dairy that he was able to do better than most farmers were. And definitely this was through hard work that he managed to have some money, even though, and of course, land was not high everything went pretty cheap during the Depression. But he bought, I think, a portion of what had been 4 small farms, and during the Depression. So I look back on that, and I'm pretty proud of him for being able to do that, and raise 6 kids at the same time. I say 6 because that's about that. There were 6 at home while I was, and then after I left, Marguerite and Collier were born. I didn't know a lot about the house when it was built. I do remember, though, that 2 Hipshire men, that they did a lot of the building of the house. And the house, they tore a barn down to build a part of the house. I'm speaking of the walls before the rock was added. And so some of the lumber that was in the house was from an old barn. And I think these Hipshire boys maybe helped with the rock work. And they were brothers of my Aunt Ruby. And that's about all I know. It's native stone. I'm not sure where they gathered it. The place is kind of rocky. I think they could have gotten a lot of it right there. I think it was Daddy's idea. I think it was his idea that he wanted those arches, and I remember hearing him speak about wanting a front porch, or he called it a wraparound porch, and it does go extend over one towards one side, but it doesn't completely wrap around. So they made an adjustment there. Well, the front bedroom, Patty and I got the front bedroom right away. I think we got to choose the wallpaper and some things like that were exciting to us. And so always the oldest two girls got the front bedroom. When we moved down there, Papaw and David got the middle bedroom. I think that David slept with our grandfather for a pretty long time. And then that huge back bedroom, that was Mama and Daddy's bedroom. There were two double beds back there, I know, and the smaller children stayed back there with them. We we didn't have any kind of swing. Excuse me. Collier has added that, a swing. No, we didn't ever have a swing or anything like that. I don't think we spent much time on the porch. Well, let's see. Of course, Patty and I, and David and Grace. I know Grace was there. She used to try to peek through the French doors when I would have a date come. She's very sneaky. I'd look over there, and there she was peeking through the French doors from the dining room
into the front room.
Into the front room, yes. So I know Grace was there, and Ruth, and Carolyn was a baby, she was, and she was the apple of everybody's eye. Patty and I would bring friends that we'd met in high school, and we'd bring them for sleepovers, and so they all thought Carolyn was so cute, and they really.
Well, I hear she was also very bossy.
Yeah, she said I'm the boss, or I think it was me the boss, and my name is Tarna Hotsis. She couldn't say her own name plain. And so for the longest time we called her Tarna Hotsis, and she's the boss. Ira was born in Jasper, Texas, in that county anyhow. But she moved to Coleman County when she was just 3 years old. She told me that, and I always remembered that. Dad's family came from Milam County, which is it attaches to Williamson County, which attaches to Travis County. So that gives you some idea of where Milam County was. They were farmers over there, tenant farmers, I guess, but they never owned land while in Milam County. When Daddy's family came to Coleman County, Uncle Andrew told me this story, and I've always enjoyed hearing it. They came by rail, and the family came in a passenger train, but my Papaw came in a boxcar with the stock. They had to, they owned some stock, and Uncle Andrew said he remembers. He was only probably 7 years old or so, and Daddy was a few years older, 11 maybe. And he remembers the stock. They had to take a siding and wait for the stock car to pass them. And Papa was standing in the open door and waved to them as they passed the passenger train. So he was just sharing that memory with me of his father passing in the stock. car and waving. He had ridden with the stock for some reason to be sure they were all right, I guess. I remember they lived in the Plainview community for a while, and then they moved later to. I could show you, I think, about where they lived. It was a time in which they lived close to the Hipshers, and that's where Uncle Andrew met my Aunt Ruby. And but no, they were still tenant farmers, and then they moved to the place on top of the hill, and they were just renting there also. But I think, and that was where they started the dairy, and I'm pretty sure that it was just my dad's idea to do it. You know, he grew a lot of his own feed then. He did farm, and thereby growing his own feed for the cattle, so he wasn't having to buy feed. And so yes, I think it was his idea. Dad was always a hard worker, and he went on a run. When you'd see him, he was almost running most of the time. He had so much energy. And so, yeah, that's where he started the dairy business when we lived up on the hill. Well, I've been the official album keeper for many years. And the first reunion was in 1971. And actually, I missed that one. We had just moved to New Orleans. So to this date, that would be 37 years. So that's quite a long time. Every time I tell someone that we have met annually for 37 years, they are amazed. Most of them are just amazed. Well, I think it's wonderful. We are a bit scattered, and at times have been even more scattered. It gets us together at least once a year, regardless of where we're living. Of course, not everyone makes it every year, of course, but it is. We know that we're going to see. In my case, my brothers and sisters. That's important to me now very much, but also the nieces and nephews that you all have grown up. And I've had the privilege of seeing you at least once a year. Yes, when I tell a lot of people that we get together that often, they'll say, "And you get along?" Well, that there's been many happy times there, and I think we need to give some credit to Collier for restoring the farmhouse, because it had sat empty for a number of years, and it needed a lot of repair. He put new windows in it. He put air conditioning, which we never had growing up. Let's see what else. And heat for the winter time. He restored it. And made some additions also. So I'm very thankful to Collier Watson for doing that. And so we've had lots of reunions there now, and of course we would not have had. We wouldn't have had them there if he hadn't restored the house. And before the restoration, we met in parks. Whoever was boss had to find a park, and everybody else had to like it, because we had a hat that said "I'm the boss" on it.